Hello everybody, it's Deborah from Attic Lane and I'm here with another video showing you how to make 8 cards, and this is using a stamp set from a company called Craftwork Cards in the northeast of England. They have recently launched a monthly subscription stamp kit, and this is the first order, this is the first delivery, and I wanted to share it with you and show you what I made just using the stamp in this set. So this is how it arrives, and you have a little gift, which is lovely, a wish list of all the craft goodies that you need to buy, and the clear stamp itself, which I'll show you in a moment. There are some cards that show you the other stamps related to this one, which you can buy, I think, for a reduced rate if you're a member of the stamp club. And then there's some inspiration, some ideas for how to use the stamp from the lady who designed them, a lady called Julie Hickey. So that's your inspiration cards there. And on the back of those cards there are instructions for exactly how each of those cards was made. So the stamp itself that I want to show you, I'm going to move this out of the way. What's really nice about this stamp is the versatility of the way it's been designed. So the petals are nice and open, which means you've got lots of opportunities for colouring, painting, pencils, alcohol markers, distress pens, whatever you choose. And it's the same story with the leaves, they're nice and open, so you've got opportunities to colour in those. Then round the outside there's a lot of foliage, and I really loved this. The whole design hangs together really nicely. You've got some little hearts, some little dots. I think the stems are beautiful, and I do a card where I focus on the stems, which I'll show you later. And you also have 2 sentiments. So the sentiments read, birthday wishes for a very special friend, and enjoy your birthday. Because I was so keen on the foliage around the outside of this stamp, I did something that maybe a lot of people might not want to do. So if you have a nervous disposition, look away, because I actually cut those pieces out. And it's quite easy to cut them straight from the stamp without destroying the stamp and without losing the opportunity to use the whole stamp in future. They cut out really cleanly, and when I put them back in, it's just like fitting them back into a jigsaw. So that then gave me a lot of versatility in how I could use this stamp to make backgrounds. I also cut out one of the sentiments. There are a few cards that I made where this sentiment was just too thick for what I wanted it to do, and so I cut off that bottom piece, and that gave me a nice narrow little sentiment. So that's what I did to my stamp. I don't always do that to stamps, but this one was a special case, I thought. When you take out your monthly subscription and when you receive your first stamp, you also get a free stamping starter kit, and you can see it says it contains 6 die cut sheets, 6 die cut tag sheets, 25 scallop tags, 50 A6 postcards and 25 sheets of A5 card. So what does that all look like? Well, it looks like that, and there is absolutely loads of it. So there are the scallop tags, and don't forget, this is all coming free with your first subscription. There are the postcards, these are the sheets, and then there are the die cut sheets as well. And there are, I think there are 6 each, yeah, 6 each of tags, and they're a whole range of sizes and colours. There's round ones, heart-shaped ones, long rectangles, standard little tags. I hope you can see those. And then there are more die cut sheets, and again there are 6 sheets of these, and these are great because you've got all those different labels all just ready to be used on your projects. I don't really want to pop these out because I'll lose them, but you can see how many you get on one sheet. So that comes free with your first subscription stamp set, and I thought that was great. This is card 1. For card 1, I stamped and cut out 2 of the flowers from the stamp. Let me show you the stamp again. So I stamped just the top of the flower, and then I cut out 2 of the petals and I cut out 5 of the leaves. I coloured the leaves and the petals with Faber-Castell Prismacolor pencils, and I added a background in sage green using the 2 pieces of cut-off foliage from the stamp, and I used them to create this gentle background. I went around the outside of that background rectangle with Versa colour and then used gold heat embossing to just seal that border, and hopefully you can see that. The piece in the middle is called a candy, and these are also from Craftwork cards. These ones are a pearly white called meringue, but what you can do is you can use Versacolor on ink on these and then use gold embossing powder, heat set it, and then it's like you have a little gold shimmery button in the middle of your card. I completed it with the sentiment that I showed you that I cut out for a very special friend, and then just to give the flowers and the leaves a little bit more zing, I used clear Wink of Stella pen on those, so hopefully you can see a little shimmer. For card 2, I started with a plain white card, and I stamped the 2 foliage branches that I took from my stamp set onto this card. I heat set with white embossing powder, and then I went over them with I went over the whole thing with a foam pad and Distress Oxide antique linen, and then I went around the outside of the card with another Distress Oxide ink, which is Wild Honey, and that way hopefully you can see in the middle it's a little bit lighter than it is on the outside. I stamped the whole of the image and I embossed it with gold glitter powder, and hopefully you can see that in the image there. I wanted the stems to be a little bit longer so that they fell lower down on the card, so I cut across the stems, and the gap under this sentiment is where the stems were parted, because I just pulled these down a little bit more to the bottom of the card, and then I covered the gap with my sentiment which says birthday wishes. I painted the petals and the leaves with Imagination Crafts metallic paints in copper and green, and I added another of the little candies, this time painted in green, and hopefully you can see the shine and the shimmer on that. For card 3, I stamped the whole of the image on white with a black ink, and I added doodles. This is what I mean about the versatility of the stamp and the openness of the leaves and the petals, because it allows you to go in and add whatever decoration you want. And around the foliage I added extra tiny little petals to make it look like there were more flowers. I also added a few more of the hearts because they were a nice theme on this stamp too. So then when I'd finished, I added For a Special Friend, my cut-off sentiment, just down that side. I mounted the whole thing onto craft card, and I added a hand-tied little bow with some twine. I tried, not very successfully, I tried to colour my candy in the centre of this to match the craft cardstock that I'd mounted the design onto, but that didn't work very well. I didn't quite get the right colour. I don't know if Craftwork cards do these little candies in craft card, but if they did, it would be great, because that's quite a difficult colour to replicate. Card 4 is a little different. Card 4 started like this and ended up like this. I was aiming for a chalkboard effect. Chalkboard is so popular at the moment, you see it everywhere, and I wondered if it would work. So I inked over the whole of the white card with Distress Oxide, and then I took the stamp and I spritzed it with water, and then I put the stamp onto the black card. I weighted it down, I left it for a few moments to give the black soot base time to react with the water, because Distress Oxides are designed to work with water, so I was curious to see what effect it would give me. So when I lifted off the weights, this is what it had. I think that's quite an interesting effect, and to enhance the effect I went around the outside of the petals with clear Wink of Stella pen, and I put little white dots in all of the foliage around the image. Card 5. I inked a background with Distress Oxides, Antique Linen and Picked Raspberry. Then I inked up my stamp in black and I stamped it onto the background. And when it was dry, I used a white gel pen just to go in the spaces between the petals and in the leaves to add a little bit of white to make it a little more interesting. Then I cut this into 1/4 inch thin strips and I glued it onto a black card, leaving little gaps between each of the strips. I added my sentiment for a very special friend, and then I added Nouveau ebony black drops where there were the little dots from the design, and then I smudged it, which is why I've been covering that over, so don't look at that bit. Don't look. So I was a bit annoyed with myself and I thought, shall I show it to you? And I thought, well, yes I will, because it shows you a technique, it shows you something else that you can do. And what I liked about this and why this might be useful is if you want the image to be a little bit wider, if you want it to fill your card a little bit more, you can just stretch it. It doesn't have to go onto black, it can be on a more subtle background. But it's a useful technique just to get a little bit more out of your stamp. For card 6, I inked the background with Distress Oxides again. I used peeled paint, seedless preserves and wild honey, and then when that was dry I stamped the image in Versacolour and added white embossing powder. When I heat set that, I then cut out a rectangle and I used a stitched rectangle die, and I hope you can see the stitching just around the edge of that. It just gives it a little extra detail, which is rather pretty. And then I mounted it onto craft card. Card 7. For this, I don't know if you can see it, this is actually watercolour paper, white watercolour paper, and it's mounted onto a plain white card. I used a hot pressed watercolour paper, which means smooth. If you want the textured watercolour paper, you would look for a cold pressed paper. So this was a smooth hot pressed watercolour paper. I stamped on the image and I used white embossing powder and heat set it. What I was doing was giving myself a resist. Then I used distress markers with clear Wink of Stella to go in and colour. So I put colour right in the bottom of the petal, and then I dragged it out with Wink of Stella. Normally you would use a water brush, but the Wink of Stella gives this a really beautiful little shimmer. I hope you can see that. So that's how I coloured the petals and the leaves, and then the blue that you can see very, very soft and subtle around the background of the flower is a blue distress marker, but this time I used water to disperse it, and it was easy enough to go in and out of these the stems and the other white areas because the white acted as a resist to the watercolour. I completed it with Nouveau jewel drops in green, and I just added those, hopefully you can see them, I just added those to the foliage in the background of the stamp. For card 8 I used the stem, so this is what I was describing earlier. I just stamped this part of the stem because I really like the design of that, I think that's lovely. So what I did was I used my plain white card and I ran a piece of tape down the middle, so I masked off the middle, and then I used my stem just to go down the outside edge, and I used alternate green and blue. When that was dry, I stamped and cut out 3 of the petals, and I coloured them again with the Faber-Castell Prismacolor pencils. Then I went over the stamens with a black ink pen and I added the candies. This time these candies are upside down. I didn't use the domed area uppermost. I turned them upside down and I filled the centre with the Nouveau ebony black drops. Then I white heat embossed my sentiment, and I drew 2 wavy lines and stuck the sentiment on top, and drew another couple of wavy lines at the top there. So those are the 8 cards, all very different, all deliberately designed to show the versatility of the stamp and what you can do, how you can have dimension, how you can break up the stamp to create different backgrounds, how you can use white embossing powder as a resist, and how you can doodle and how you can experiment as well. So I hope that's useful. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon with another video. Now I'm going to leave you with some close-up photographs of each of the cards and a little music.